If I wanted to add 100,000 in sales in the next 12 months, I wouldn't start by chasing more leads or cold calling more people or spending more money on advertising. And I definitely wouldn't start by learning clever closing lines. I would build a system, the system that I'm about to show you. A system that has helped me not only increase sales by over 100,000 in a year, but go on to make that increase into £1 million in 1 year. And the same underlying approach that has helped me go from a struggling salesperson to a career involving more than 50 million in sales. Because in my experience, most business owners, entrepreneurs, consultants, or coaches don't have a sales problem because they lack opportunity. They have a sales problem because too many opportunities are being wasted. Yet, most business owners that I have talked to look at leads coming in and the sales being made and conclude one of two things. We need more leads, or we need to get better at closing. And sometimes that may be true. Or, and I see this a lot, they search for a magic bullet. I can tell you there is no magic bullet. But very often there is a more important problem to resolve. Somewhere between the inquiry and the potential sale, they have an unrecognized trust issue. So the business owner assumes the lead wasn't good enough, or the prospect wasn't serious, or the price was too high, because no prospect ever says, "I'm not buying because I don't trust you enough." And yet, in my experience, that is often the real objection. But lack of trust is a silent objection. And in a world where prospects are more cautious and less trusting than ever, it is quietly becoming one of the biggest reasons business owners lose sales. When trust is strong, many of the normal sales problems become easier to deal with. And when trust is weak, every small doubt becomes a reason not to buy. So, not theory, not hype. A practical trust-led sales system to massively increase your sales, which I call the personalization code sales method. Because no trust equals no sale. Now, just before I get into the system, I've put together a free sales growth diagnostic tool for you that will help you identify where your current sales process may be letting you down and where your biggest opportunity to get that extra £100,000 may lay and turn more inquiries into paying clients. You'll find the link below. Right, let's get into the system. So here are the 7 steps within the system. Step 1, find the opportunity gap. This is where we work out exactly what improvement is needed to add £100,000 in sales. Step 2, gain 5 hours of selling time every week. If you're going to add £100,000 in sales, you need more than a better strategy. You need the time and focus to implement it. So here I'll show you how to find that time. Step 3, find the lost sales hiding in plain sight. I have never come across a sales process that didn't have extra sales sitting in it. So this step will reveal where those prospects are stalling, losing confidence, or disappearing inside your current sales journey. Step 4, build the journey that turns trust into sales. Once we know where the prospects are being lost, this step shows you how to redesign the journey so more of the right people stay engaged, maintain trust, and move towards a buying decision. Step 5, make it easy on yourself. Automate the journey. Automation and AI can do much of the heavy lifting. It's cheaper and easier to do than ever before. Used properly, it's like having a personal assistant supporting your sales process 24/7. Step 6, the one question that reveals what really matters. People don't buy on price, data, graphs, or features alone. They use logic to justify the decision, but the real decision is usually driven by emotion. This step shows you how to ask the question that gets to the heart of what really matters. So your solution connects to the real reason they may buy. And then step 7, how to scale what works. Once the system is in place, this final step shows you how to measure, improve, and scale it. So your sales growth does not depend on luck, random effort, or starting again every month. And if that sounds like a lot, don't worry. You don't need to fix everything at once. You can improve one thing at a time, and each improvement can deliver more sales. The important thing is that you are no longer guessing. You are building a sales system deliberately, one that helps more of the right prospects move from inquiry to decision with trust, confidence, and clarity. Now, let's start with step 1. Find the opportunity gap. Before you change anything in your sales process, you need to understand what is actually happening in your business right now. Because £100,000 sounds like a big number, but when you break it down, it often becomes much, much more achievable. So the first step is to look at a few simple numbers that really matter within your business. Start with your average sale value. Take your last 10 sales, add them together, and divide that number by 10. That gives you your average sale value, a current up-to-date value. Then ask how many extra sales would create 100,000. You work that out by dividing 100,000 by your average sales value. So if, for example, your average sale is £5,000, then adding £100,000 in sales means you need 20 extra sales over the next 12 months. Now, 20 extra sales might sound like a bit of a shift, but divide that by 12 months, that is less than 2 extra sales per month. Now, you can't make 0.67 of a sale, so some months 2 extra sales, some months 1 extra sale. So now the question changes. You are no longer asking, how do I find another 100,000? You're asking, how do I create around 2 extra sales a month? That immediately feels more practical. Now the next question is, how many inquiries do you currently receive each month? And what percentage of those inquiries currently become sales? So for example, if over the last 3 months you received 20 inquiries per month and made 10 sales per month, your inquiry to sale conversion ratio is 50%. Now I'm deliberately keeping this very simple. Your conversion rate could be 10% or 70%. It's the next part that is important. Now look at what happens. If you can improve that conversion rate of say 50% to 60%, those same 20 inquiries now create 12 sales instead of 10. Just a 10 percentage point improvement gives you 2 extra sales per month. And if your average sale value is £5,000, those 2 extra sales per month are worth £10,000 a month. Over 12 months, that's £120,000 in additional sales. Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying I can guarantee you an extra £120,000. That will depend on your current numbers, your average sales value, the quality of your inquiries, how well your sales process works now, and of course, how consistently you apply the improvements. But the point I want you to see is this. You don't always need to have some massive breakthrough. You don't necessarily need hundreds of new leads. Sometimes a relatively small improvement in the way you convert the inquiries you already have can make a very big difference. And this is why this first step matters so much. Because once you know your numbers, you can stop guessing. You can see the opportunity. And you can start working on the part of the process most likely to give you the biggest gain. And you will have done it without increasing your advertising spend or chasing more leads or putting more pressure on yourself. You'll have done it by improving the system between inquiry and decision. That's the key point. For many businesses, the quickest, easiest, and cheapest route to growth is not more leads, it's converting more of the right inquiries that are already coming in. And that's why we start here. Because once you know your numbers, you can stop guessing and you can start identifying exactly where your sales are being lost and what needs to change to win more of them. Step 2. Gain 5 hours of selling time every week. As a business owner, you are constantly juggling competing demands. So if you're going to add £100,000 in sales, you need more than a better strategy. You need the time and focus to implement it. This is why I've put this step here. By eliminating time wasters at the start of the process, you can potentially reclaim 5 or more hours every week and reinvest that time into building a better selling system. One of the biggest problems business owners face is that they spend far too much time with people who are never going to buy. And this creates 2 major problems. First, it wastes huge amounts of time. And second, it drains emotional energy and confidence because these prospects can often appear genuine. Some pretend to be interested in your products or service when really they're just trying to sell you something. Some want free consultancy. They want your knowledge, your ideas and your expertise, but have no real intention of paying for it. Are you giving away free consultancy? Some are non-decision makers. They are gathering information to present to someone else or to help them do their own job. But they don't tell you that up front. And some genuinely want what you have to offer, but do not have the budget and are never likely to have it. Most business owners assume that when they lose a sale, they must have done something wrong. But very often, the only thing they did wrong was fail to identify early enough that the prospect was either unwilling or unable to buy. And if you can identify those people early in the process, you can reclaim enormous amounts of time. In essence, every serious prospect has to pass two tests. Are they willing? Are they able? First, are they willing? In other words, do they actually have a real problem to solve? A frustration, a risk, a challenge, or an aspiration strong enough to motivate action? Because if there is no genuine pain point, there is usually no real buying motivation. And this is why asking better questions is so important. You need to understand why they contacted you, what they are trying to achieve, what is not working for them commercially, operationally, or personally, what happens if they do nothing, and how important solving the problem really is. When you ask the right questions, genuine buying motivation becomes much more easy to identify. Now, the second question, are they able? And this is where I find that many business owners become uncomfortable, because now we need to establish things like, do they have the budget, or are they likely to get it? Do they have the authority? What is their decision-making process? What timeline are they working to? Now? Soon? 2 years from now? What we're trying to establish is whether the prospect can realistically move forward. A prospect may generally want your solution, but still not be in a position to buy. And unless you identify that early, you can spend weeks, sometimes months, chasing opportunities that were never real. Don't just accept vague answers here. The more vague the answer, the less committed they're likely to be. Pin them down in a nice but persistent manner. This is why qualification matters so much. Not to pressure people, not to manipulate them, but to protect your time, your energy, and your focus. As a business owner, your time is one of the most valuable assets. In fact, depending on the number of leads you currently handle, you could potentially reclaim 5 or more hours every single week simply by identifying time wasters earlier in the process. And those 5 hours can then be reinvested into better conversations, better follow-up, stronger systems, and more time with serious buyers. Step 3. Find the lost sales hidden in plain sight. What happens when someone inquires in your business? Is there an immediate response? If there isn't, then you have hidden sales. Alex Hormozi says that if you respond to a client inquiry in less than a minute, the chances of winning that client goes up by 391%. After that first response, do you follow up with useful educational emails? If you don't, you have hidden sales. Do you send reminders before a meeting so the prospect remembers the appointment and feels clear about why it's worth attending? If not, you have hidden sales. What happens if the prospect goes quiet? Is there a process for re-engaging them, or does everything depend on you remembering to chase? If not, you have hidden sales. To capture all those hidden sales, we need to map the whole sales journey, because this is where many of the lost sales are hiding. Most people think of sales as the meeting or pitch or a proposal, but the sales starts the first time someone becomes aware of you, and it continues after the meeting when they are back in their own world, distracted by emails, problems, deadlines, staff, family, and anything else going on in their life. So I would map every point where a prospect interacts with your business and every gap between those interactions. And be honest here, don't write down what you hope happens, write down what actually happens. Because until you can see the real journey, you can't improve it. As you map the journey, look for the points where the prospect may be waiting too long, receiving too little information, feeling uncertain, or being left without a clear next step. These are hidden sales hiding in plain sight. Once you have mapped out what actually happens, we can move into step 4, designing what should happen instead. Step 4, build the journey that turns into sales. I once implemented a customer journey for a company based on the personalization code sales method, where the owner later told me that, in his opinion, it added around 5 million to the value of the business. Now, I can't guarantee that it can do this for your company, but it could add tremendous value in the buyer's mind. After this video, when you map what currently happens, the next job will be to build the journey that should happen. I don't want you to stop and do this now. For the moment, just understand the process. At each touch point and in the gaps between touch points, ask yourself one simple question. Does this increase trust or reduce it? When the prospect makes an inquiry, is there an immediate response? For example, If there is no immediate response to an inquiry, does that increase trust or reduce it? It reduces it, right? If there is a complete silence between booking a meeting and the meeting itself, does that increase trust or reduce it? If there is no proper follow-up after a meeting, does that increase trust or reduce it? Remember, a slow reply can damage trust. A generic follow-up can damage trust. An AI follow-up can damage trust. A confusing explanation can damage trust. And when those little trust leaks appear, the prospect may not tell you. They won't say, "Oh, I'm not buying because I don't fully trust you." They'll say things like, "Let me think about it. I'll come back to you. We're not ready yet. Can you send me some more information?" And then they vanish. Sound familiar? So look every point where the trust is dropping and ask what needs to happen. Ask what needs to happen here to restore confidence, reduce uncertainty, and keep the prospect moving forward. For each weak point, write down 3 things. What the prospect may be thinking, what doubt needs to be reduced, and what communication would help them feel more confident. Don't just ask, "What should we send?" Ask, "What does the prospect need to feel at this point?" You do not need to fix everything in one go. Start with the points where trust is dropping fastest or where the biggest number of sales are being lost. If you find 10 weak points, don't panic. Start with the 1 or 2 that are most likely costing you sales. Remember from step 1, you may only need 1 or 2 extra sales a month. So one improvement in the journey has the potential to make a very large difference. Step 5, make it easy on yourself. Automate the journey. Once you've mapped the sales journey, the next step is to automate it. Use CRM automation and AI to do much of the heavy lifting. Used properly, it's like having a personal assistant supporting your sales process 24/7. There are 2 parts to this. First, what to automate. Second, the quality of the communication that goes out through that automation. First then, what do we automate? You can automate emails, texts, WhatsApp messages, appointment reminders, diary bookings, responses to common questions, prompts to call prospects, reminders to send personalized messages. Each channel has a different job. Email is useful for education, proof and explanation. Text and WhatsApp are useful for reminders, simple prompts, assurances. Phone calls are still important where trust, nuance, or reassurance is needed. In other words, much of the journey can, and in today's environment, must be systemized. But there is an important distinction here. Some parts of the journey can be fully automated. Other parts should simply trigger the right human action at the right time, because trust-led selling still needs judgment, timing, and personal attention. So, do not automate a broken journey. Automation does not fix a poor process. It simply repeats it faster and more consistently. The good news is that it has never been easier or cheaper to automate the sales journey properly. And this is one of the major steps in adding an extra 100,000 in sales in the next 12 months, and potentially taking you far beyond that, because many prospects need several thoughtful contacts before they feel ready to buy. That means consistent, thoughtful follow-up is critical. And at any kind of scale, you can only really do this effectively with a properly structured automated system. Even highly motivated buyers need to be guided through the buying process. Never assume that the client will simply come back to you. Here's what this might look like. A prospect visits your website and completes an inquiry form. Immediately, the CRM automatically sends an information brochure, a welcome email, and a text message asking the prospect to look out for the email and add the address as a safe sender. One day later, the CRM reminds you to call the prospect. The next day, the prospect receives a useful education email that helps them understand the problem, the options, or the decision they are considering. 2 days later, they receive a case study showing how another client achieved a successful outcome using your system. And the important thing here is this: the prospect should never feel they are inside a machine. It should feel timely, relevant, reassuring, helpful, personal. And that brings us to the second part of automation, the quality of the communication. Yes, automation done properly makes you more efficient, but more importantly, it helps maintain consistency of trust throughout the whole sales journey. This is where the quality of your communication comes in, because follow-up is not simply chasing. Most follow-up sounds like this: just checking in. Any thoughts? Did you have a chance to look at the proposal? This is not trust-led follow-up. This is simply a reminder that you want an answer. A trust-led follow-up does something very different. It reminds the prospect why the conversation mattered. It reflects back what they said. It clarifies the problem. It reinforces the value. It reduces uncertainty, and it gives them something useful. For example, instead of saying, just checking in to see what you thought, you might send a case study that relates directly to the problem they described in the meeting. That feels completely different. It shows you listened and understood, and it reconnects the prospect with the emotional reason they had the conversation in the first place. Remember though, AI can help you. It can help you write faster, but if it produces generic communication, it will damage trust faster as well. So if you want to add an extra 100,000 in sales, I would create a follow-up sequence for every serious prospect. Not a robotic sequence, a trust-led sequence. The real power is the ability to build trust, systematically, consistently, and at scale, even while you are busy running the business. And when you combine a mapped sales journey with trust-led automation, something very important happens. Prospects stop feeling chased and start feeling guided. Step 6, the one question that really matters. This was the question that helped me move from struggling in life insurance sales to becoming a successful salesperson and eventually a national sales manager responsible for more than 1,000 sales staff. This is the question. If you were to die tomorrow, how would your family look after themselves financially? That question changed everything, because suddenly we were not talking about policies, premiums, paperwork, or insurance companies. We were talking about their husband or wife, their children, their mortgage, their home, and their future. The conversation moved from a product conversation to a human conversation. And once we started exploring the financial consequences of them dying or becoming critically ill, the prospect became emotionally connected to the solution, because they could now see and feel the real consequences of doing nothing. People do not usually buy because of facts alone. They may justify the decision with facts, logic, data, or numbers, but very often the decision itself is driven by emotion. That is why this step is so important. You need to find the question that gets the real reason the prospect may buy. In the real world, we are not selling business to business or business to consumer. We're selling human to human. A human with pressures, worries, ambitions, responsibilities, fears, hopes, and consequences attached to the decision that they are about to make. When I sold life insurance, I did not become successful by telling people we were a reputable company, or that our prices were competitive, or that we offered good personal service. Those things mattered, I suppose. Of course they did. But you need an emotional trigger question. This is not about manipulating emotion. It's about understanding why the decision really matters. Because if you don't understand that, your recommendation will always sit at like the surface level. Now, the emotional trigger question will depend on what you sell. If you run a gym, the question is not simply what training do you want to do or how many times a week can you come. The real question is, why do you want to join the gym? And when they say, as they often do, I want to lose weight, you go deeper. Why is that important to you now? That is where the real answer appears. It might be, my doctor has warned me about my health. I'm getting married in 6 months' time. I'm going on holiday with friends and I feel embarrassed about how I look. I want to be able to play with my grandchildren. Now you are no longer talking about gym equipment. You are talking about identity, confidence, health, family, and self-respect, all of which create emotion. And this applies even if you sell something that appears practical or technical. I mean, you might say, for instance, well, I sell machine parts. How can anyone get emotional about that? And I understand. But remember this, you're not actually selling the product. You are selling the results of the product. You are selling the result the product creates. You are selling the problem it prevents. You are selling the risk it removes. You're selling the confidence it gives. You're selling the positive consequences of getting it right and the avoided consequences of getting it wrong. So the key question is, what is the emotional consequence attached to the problem my product or service solves? Once you know that, you can create your emotional trigger question. A simple way to find your own emotional trigger question is to ask yourself 3 things. What problem does my product or service solve? What happens if that problem is not solved? And what would solving it mean personally, commercially, or emotionally to the prospect? The purpose of this emotional trigger question is always the same: to move the conversation from what are you buying to why does this matter? Emotional understanding creates trust, and trust is what turns a sales conversation into a real business relationship. Step 7. How to scale what works once this system is in place. The final step is to scale what works. This is what I call the perpetual gains loop. The part of the system that keeps improving your sales results month after month. You measure what is happening because the only way you can improve is to measure. So the first thing we do is measure what is happening in our sales process. And we started this in step 1. Then we refine what we are doing. You identify the weakest point that could make the biggest difference. You refine or improve that one part of the system and make sure we have a method for tracking the results of each refinement or improvement that we make. Then we analyze the results. So instead of guessing, you create a simple improvement loop. Measure, refine, track, analyze. That might mean improving your inquiry response, strengthening your follow-up, or changing your first conversation, or adding better proof, or reducing the number of prospects who go quiet after the proposal. The point is not to rebuild everything every month. Small improvements compound. A slightly better inquiry response, a stronger follow-up, a clearer meeting structure, or a better proof sequence may not look dramatic on its own, but together they can transform the whole sales journey. The point is to keep improving the one part of the system that is most likely to create the next gain. And because you started with the numbers in step 1, you're not improving random parts of the business. You are improving the parts most likely to help you reach the extra £100,000. This is how you turn a one-off sales improvement into a repeatable growth system. And once something works, you don't just hope it keeps working, you document it so it can be repeated. You automate it where possible. You train it into the business, and then you scale it. But a word of warning, only scale what is working consistently. Do not scale confusion. Do not scale guesswork. Scale the parts of the system that have proved they increase trust and improve conversion. That is how your sales growth stops depending on luck, bursts of effort, or starting again every month. To get your free sales growth diagnostic tool mentioned earlier, that will help you identify where your current sales process may be letting you down and where your biggest opportunity is to turn more inquiries into paying clients, just click the link below.